Hello and welcome. I'm Patrick Curtis, your host and chief monkey, and this is the Wall Street Oasis podcast. Join me as I talk to some of the community's most successful and inspirational members to gain valuable insight into different career paths and life in general. Let's get to it. Real quick announcement I wanted to make before today's episode. We are super excited because we just released 6 new financial modeling training courses on Wall Street Oasis. You can check it out on the homepage, wallstreetoasis.com or wallstreetoasis.com/courses. We're super excited because it includes Excel modeling, valuation modeling, DCF, LBO, M&A, financial statement modeling, basically anything you will need to master financial modeling and hit the ground running day one. Definitely don't wait to check it out because there is an early access discount going on right now. And that's it. Enjoy the episode. In this episode, Skin in the Game 16 shares his non-traditional path to a top asset manager in London. From dropping out of high school to traveling abroad to breaking into a top master's program in London. Hear how he navigated some unforgiving circumstances growing up in Brussels. Enjoy. All right, Skin in the Game 16. Thanks so much for joining the Wall Street Oasis podcast.
Thank you for having me, Patrick.
So it'd be awesome if you could just give the listeners a short summary of your bio.
Cool, sure. So I basically dropped out of high school in my last year. Sort of had a bit of trouble with school and at home and stuff, and had trouble finishing. So I basically had to leave school and found myself in a situation sort of with no high school degree, seeing my friends going off to university.
And this was in London?
This was still in Belgium, actually. This was in Belgium, Brussels, okay. Where I grew up. So I just didn't really know what to do. So I basically started working a little bit. I went traveling for some time in South America. So I had an amazing time there. Learned a bit of Spanish, met some amazing people, and then came back and sort of had to start working because I sort of basically owed my parents a bit of money for the traveling, etc. So then I started working for this real estate company, small sort of family office real estate company in Brussels called E118 Management. So they basically rented and managed a series like 40-50 residential flats on behalf of a small group of sort of owners, investors. Mm-hmm. And I did that for 2 years and sort of realized in the meantime, well, if I don't have a degree, probably I'm not really going to continue progressing, etc. So in the meantime, sort of not having much confidence in studying, I sort of signed up to this distance university program in the UK called the Open University. And I basically, I did my full undergraduate degree with them whilst sort of working full time. And then, so I did pretty well and wanted to try and move into finance in London. And the best way for me to do that was try to get into grad school in London, and then, try and get my bearings from there. So I did that. I managed to get into a target school in the UK after, like a couple of really sort of tough years balancing work and studying. And from there, I did grad school there, economics, and then joined a sort of medium-sized US asset manager. So I joined as sort of like an associate there for 2 years and rotated across different parts of the business. So, anything from, I did marketing, sort of finance, sales, parts of operations, and then finally investment management, which I sort of managed to, meet a few people, networked with quite a few people there. And they sort of, guided me towards what I sort of wanted to do in the long run, which was real estate. And sort of my old company didn't really do any sort of alternative assets in real estate. So it sort of had made sense for me to move, and they sort of helped me, prepare for interviews.
The company you were at helped you prepare?
The company I was at. So basically, just a few people who just basically like mentored me in a way. And then I applied to quite a few firms, and it was quite got a lot of rejections. And then it was difficult, but I finally did make it, and So I've now been working as a fund manager assistant on the global real estate securities desk. So I'm a large global asset manager. And yeah, so I've been doing that for 2 years now. And it's been going pretty well.
So I love this. It's a really interesting story because I think you probably had a lot more of a winding road than a lot of the guests I've had on here. I don't know if we've had any guests that actually took a year off or dropped out of high school. So tell me a little bit about let's go back there. Like what was specifically, what was going on through, as much as you can share, you're comfortable sharing, what was going on such that you had to just stop high school? You're just flunking out because there's so many distractions, or what was going on?
Yeah, well, I mean, so towards the end of high school, I guess my parents sort of broke up, so that was kind of difficult. And then I guess sort of I lost connection with studying, and then from that, sort of started not caring as much, and hanging out with maybe not the best influences. And it's just a bit of a slippery slope. Yeah.
And so did you end up just dropping out because who were you living with, your mom or your dad, or both?
Yeah, I was living with still both my mom and my dad at the time. But then basically, basically I just had to drop out, had to leave the school.
Did you see it coming, their breakup, or was it a complete shock?
It was a bit of a shock, to be honest. And it's, I guess, just at that age, and not necessarily, I mean, it's always difficult, but you might not have the right tools to be able to sort of see beyond it. And, you count on your parents quite a lot. So it's a bit difficult.
And you're a little bit like, you're still young, you're still a little immature. Probably as a guy, we mature later, right? So yeah. Definitely. So tell me about like what made you think I'm going to go travel to South America, and where did you go and why?
Yeah. So basically, I realized, so I basically quit school and was at home a lot, and I had way too much free time. Mm-hmm. And my mom just was like, well, if you're not going to be at school, you need to do something. And she was like, well, why don't you go traveling for a bit? I was like, well, not really, I'd rather just stay here. My friends all live here. And she kind of pushed me to go traveling, and it was quite random. So I just basically literally looked at the map of the world, and was like, well, South America seems far, seems cool. People speak Spanish there. And yeah, but it was kind of random, but it worked out really well.
It sounds a little bit like how I decided to go to Buenos Aires after my MBA. I was like, where can I go to improve my Spanish and where I can travel from a lot of places? And I chose Buenos Aires as like my home base.
Exactly. That sounds amazing.
Where were you in South America again?
Yeah, so I was mainly in Peru and Colombia. So
my mother's Colombian. I don't know if you knew.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know.
She's from Cali, Colombia, on the coast.
Oh, really? Beautiful. Yeah. I've been there. Really, really nice. Okay.
Yeah. They're really well known for salsa. So cool. Okay, so you're there for how long?
So I was there for like 6 months.
So your mom was funding all of this?
Well, no, she helped me. She helped me fund it, and my grandparents are actually were really helpful and supportive.
Yeah. So they just thought it'd be a good growing kind of time for you. Was it end up like just a party for you, or did you feel like you gained any maturity throughout the process?
It was a lot of fun, but I do think I actually learned from it as a sort of, as a person, maybe, because I went there on my own, so you do kind of figure out, who you are and you want and stuff. And I think maybe I'm a bit more resilient, a bit more mature too. Yeah,
I think traveling can do that, right? When you're forced to figure things out on your own and where you're going to live and all that good stuff. So tell me a little bit about why you decided to come back, when you came back, and then what was kind of the conversation you had with your mom or your dad at that point?
Yeah, so I basically, I came back home because it was it'd been 6 months, and I'd run out of money, and also it'd been time, and I just I came home, wanted to get started working, which is all great, but then I quite quickly realized, I guess, that it's cool to be earning money when your friends are studying, but how, what's the future, and sort of where is this going to take me?
And you were what, 18 at this time or 19 or something like that?
Yeah, 19 going on 20, I think, it was like another 6. Yeah, so it's about 19, 20. And
What's it like in Brussels? Like, where were
yeah,
you live? Like, I don't know anything about the city. So
yeah. So Brussels is it's like a medium-sized European city. So I mean, I'd say similar to like a Barcelona. It's a northern European city.
like Barcelona. I love Barcelona.
Yeah, but the weather's much. There's nowhere as nice. It's not near the beach. But it's a nice place, and it's pretty international too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So what gave you the idea of, so you were working for, I think you said a real estate firm, right? For
Yeah,
a couple of
yeah,
years when you got back. And
yeah, that's correct.
do you mind sharing what you were getting paid? I assume it was very low because you didn't even have a high school.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was back. I think it was like literally in euros back around just under like 30K. It was like 26, 27 or something.
27,000 euros
Yeah.
per year. That's not that bad.
That wasn't that bad.
I guess for the city, if you're living in the city, it's pretty low. But
yeah.
But okay, so you're doing this and then kind of studying at nights, and that's in this kind of online university. Is that something that's more common in the US? Did you feel like, hey, if I get this degree from this online university, because I know there's a lot of for-profit universities here in the US, and it's a big problem because a lot of kids take on debt thinking, if I go do this university degree, if I get my bachelor's, I'm set, I'm gonna be able to find a job, when the reality is very different from that. And a lot of these for-profit universities take advantage of kids. Charge a lot of money to say, hey, we're accredited, we have a bachelor's, but they're barely accredited, and the quality of education isn't great. And so tell me how you thought about that, or if you didn't think about it at all, it's fine too.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess having not finished high school and sort of like being out of studying for a bit, I sort of lacked a bit of confidence to go back to full-time studying, and sort of doing it the traditional way. And then this sort of idea came up through my mom, and I was like, is this a good idea? Like, is this, what's this going to get me, whatever. And but in the end, it was, it was in the UK, like in Europe at least, it's, it is still pretty accredited. If you
pretty well respected.
Really well. Yeah, I mean, if you do well, you're kind of like, okay, he's done really well regardless, and he's been studying at home, and I guess people value that. But I mean, I think if I had the choice, I would definitely just go the traditional route.
Looking back, you wish you had kind of stayed through and finished high school.
Yeah, and you miss out also on the real life student experience, right? Which is a pity. Yeah.
Which is some of the best years of your life, man. No,
exactly. I want them back.
You want them back? Yeah, I'm sure you do. So you're okay. So you're, but you finish. It takes you a few years, and you get your degree in what, 2 years? That fast online while you're working?
Oh no. It was no. Sorry, it was so basically I didn't work during the whole time. Studying, but I worked most of the time. But it took the degree in total was like 4 years. It was like 4 years.
During that time of the online studying and working part time, you said you kind of were thinking finance. So tell me a little bit about why were you interested in that? Was it just because you saw a lot of fun movies like Wolf of Wall Street kind of back then, or Boiler Room, and that, hey, this will be a fun way to, maybe this is a way to be lucrative, not dependent on my parents anymore? What was the thought process?
Sure. So it was a bit of that, but it was also I have an uncle who quite randomly sort of set up a couple of 20 years ago a hedge fund. And he I mean, not that we were super close, but I sort of we've gone on holiday, we started talking, and I liked economics, and I was like, oh, so how does this work? And understanding, I guess, the importance of the financial services within an economy, and I kind of liked it, and I was like, okay, I can, maybe I'd like to try and become part of this. And then it's, then from
Isn't it funny how those little conversations, whether it's families or friends or friends, completely change your entire life trajectory?
Yeah, definitely. Then, you from one thing to then you started, reading up stuff, and then, reading the FT from time to time, and then, whatever it was, and you just start reading more and more. Then I just kind of got really interested.
Got it. And so when you were, as you're approaching graduation from this online university, what was your thought process in terms of job prospects versus okay, I'm going to have to get a master's?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, to be like but the thing, so basically, I wanted to try and get a job in London in finance,
Mm-hmm.
straight out of school, well, the online undergraduate. But it was proving pretty difficult for two reasons. First being, I sort of got interested in the finance thing a little bit late to be able to like do internships and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And London, like like New York, like any like most big global financial centers is extremely competitive, and I didn't have that, and I also didn't really have necessarily the right credential university from a university perspective.
Of course.
So I sort of tried that, but it was really hard. And also being in Brussels is kind of, it's hard to just, I can't keep on traveling to try and get to go for interviews and stuff. So yeah, so grad school was like, I was like, well, this could be the way in. Yeah.
And so how did you prepare kind of your, like you ended up getting into a top school in London, but tell me about like how you even prepared or how you wrote those essays to get in there.
Yeah. So
That's competitive. That's competitive too, right? Because people know the ticket,
Yeah. So basically what I started doing in the year before is I started reaching out to alumni. I started reaching out to students that studied at the university,
mm-hmm.
and also tried to. So basically, when alumni sort of gave me a call or whatever, or I'd have some bit of time with them, I'd sort of try to explain my motivation, my narrative, and especially, I guess, where I'm coming from. And they sort of helped me, I guess, sort of maybe position my story, and also better define kind of what I want from university and sort of like what I'm trying to get out of it.
Isn't that so key? Kind of making sure you had a consistent theme throughout your application. Like you almost want to brand yourself, right? I always tell people who are applying to business school, like if you're a kid from finance, investment banker, private equity, whatever, you want to be outside of that crowd. You want to somehow brand yourself differently from everybody else. Whether that's, for me, it was education technology, kind of, having built or started Wall Street Oasis really, I think was an advantage for me because I could point to that and talk about how education technology, I think, was changing the landscapes. And that's how I branded myself to get into Wharton. I feel like if you have something you can lean on, or there's stuff in your extracurriculars you could point to, I assume. So
yeah.
What were those? Were there themes you'd be willing to share with the
audience? So I guess, I mean, the main one is probably pretty obvious, is just the fact that, my story and the fact that I sort of had to quit high school and sort of had to, take a couple of back doors to get in.
The underdog. The underdog.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. People love an underdog. That's great. That's smart.
So that was the sort of the angle I came from. But I also, I was just, I guess, having lived in Brussels, been in an international environment, having, traveled on my own a bit before and stuff like that. And just being able to, I just played a lot on the narrative that, I've done lots of different things, but I like to bring them all together to be able to do this thing.
I love it.
Yeah. So I guess.
So did you think you were going to get in? Did you apply to a safety school? What was the thought? What happened when you got that letter?
I'm going to be honest. I was a little bit bold. I think I applied to 2 schools in London actually, and got into both. But I didn't. I was like, this isn't going to happen. This is a distance university. Like, but I'll give it a go. And then it just when I got the letter, I was like, oh wow. And then,
like, I'm actually going.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell me about aid. Were you able to get any financial aid, or you didn't need it? Like, your mom was already helping you with stuff. Was your dad in the picture still helping?
My dad wasn't really, unfortunately. My mom was. And another thing is, to be honest, I actually managed to save. I was earning way less than now, but I actually managed to save quite a bit because Brussels is kind of cheaper than London. I was studying I basically had no free time. So I wasn't spending much money. But yeah, my mom was really helpful too. Cool. And yeah.
So you end up going to school. You're super excited, I assume. Yeah. You end up going, definitely. And then tell me, this program, it's a 2-year program, correct?
It's actually 1 year.
It's 1 year. Okay. So it's a 1 year because it's a master's. It's not like the equivalent of like the MBA. It's a master's kind of with economic bent to it, or we'll call it.
Yeah, exactly.
And tell me about like what your research was. You were applying to that specific program. Tell me about, did you do a lot of research beforehand to see what people were getting placed into out of that role or out of that school?
Yeah. So, it's a pretty, notable school, like in London, and I mean in Europe, in the UK, and in the world actually. So it's basically, a lot of kids. I think, like for most schools, I think a good 70% or so probably want to try and get into investment banking. Then I think there's for finance, right? And then I guess there's the rest kind of want to do asset management or other stuff. And so I kind of so investment banking was hard. It was like really hard, obviously, because also the other thing is a lot of the kids that were at the school who were undergraduates already done internships and whatever, and the competition is just that big that it's going to be pretty tough. And then even asset management actually was pretty difficult because, like for most big banks and stuff, the big asset managers, the BlackRocks, the Vanguards of the world, they'll have pretty structured recruiting, so they'll do that in September, October, and then like if you kind of miss that boat, well, you're like, what do I do next? So
it's fast. It happens fast. Like you get on campus and you're recruiting right away, basically.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, they do like these companies have like networking dinners. Yeah, like in August already, like before the school's already even started. So so I did that, and then spent the rest of the year just with another friend of mine who was not in a similar situation, but we had some commonalities, and we just really we went to events, we went to company events, we reached out to people on LinkedIn, we applied to so many jobs.
Did you start getting some interviews on campus or whatnot?
I got a few, and then I got a few. Then I had got to an assessment center, but unfortunately didn't get that.
Because the assessment center, what were they testing? Like numerical reasoning skills and stuff like that?
A bit of numerical reasoning, situational judgment, technicals, and also like these, I guess, sort of situational day in the life type of games where everyone's just like trying to cut each other, like where everyone's just like out for themselves. So I did that, but then I finally, so towards the end of the year, managed to land 2 offers. So one in this asset management company, and then the other one in sort of like so it was Big Four actually. So I got an offer for a role there, and I just kind of the company, the asset management company, seemed to just better fit what I kind of wanted to do.
And what was that? Like more on the trading side, more on the market side?
More on the market side.
And what was the Big Four offer in? Like what group? Do you remember?
Oh yeah. So it was audit actually. It was audit. Actually.
Okay. Yeah. So you didn't really want to go the accounting route or that stuff.
Yeah. No, I mean sometimes I'm like, well, that could have been another route, but I kind of prefer the asset management route. And
why was that? What was your thought process? Like personality? Was it because of your personality? Was it because that uncle? I think you said your uncle told you about hedge funds, and that sounded appealing.
Yeah. I think I had a slight incline towards, I guess, the more markets. I said more sort of markets as opposed to, I guess, corporate finance, accounting, and even I guess more the banking side. So. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that, because you were there for 2 years, correct? When you came out of school, and tell me about the progression. It sounded like a rotational program when you're going over it earlier. Sorts. And so that's kind of awesome because you didn't really have those internships, right, to lean on from before. You didn't have like the
exactly.
So it sounds like the perfect fit for you. So tell me about like your rotation through each kind of group and what you liked or didn't like, or what was surprising to you kind of coming out of school.
Yeah. So basically I rotate. So each group was the first group was like 6 months, but the rest were like 3 months, which goes really, really quickly.
Yeah.
So you basically, you land in a team, you have a sort of manager or sort of, associate or manager, who's kind of, gives you the work and trains you. And it's pretty intense, but because you don't really get it, 3 months is is not really, it's nowhere near enough to, even get a sort of minimal understanding of that part of the business. But what you really do get, and I think more specifically, I mean, I say this for asset management, that's obviously what it refers to. You do get a really good understanding of the business in its entirety. So, what do sales do, and who do they go and sell out to? Who are our clients? Are they institutional?
Is that the marketing side you were mentioning before? When you said marketing, do you mean like the sales side, like talking to clients and selling them products?
Yeah, exactly. So then you learn, you learn to learn a bit more about the geography of the clients, the type of clients, the type of products they're interested in. And then, then I moved on to obviously also like client service, which is a little bit more sort of, on the relationship management side, where you're working with your current clients and helping them with, it's market queries or, whatever in terms of so that's, and then, obviously then moved on to a bit more of the investment management side, which is actually what I wanted to do. And there's
the investment management side, meaning like you were actually structuring products, or you were actually trading?
The actual sort of, I guess the portfolio management guys.
You're like helping analyze different portfolios, and like, can you give me an example, like what you do one day?
Exactly. Yeah. So actually that company is pretty interesting in the sense that they was pretty much based on a fund of fund model. So, they call it manager research. So what you would do is, so the guy would sort of work for whatever, he'd give me maybe a list of managers, which you can, Bloomberg or whatever program you're using, go and check up their track record, their thematics, their investment thesis, and just be able to essentially try and figure out, which managers are better or not, and for what reasons. So I guess, from sort of a 3-month sort of internship.
Are you able to see returns in like in the Bloomberg?
Well, you can see, the thing is, you can have an idea of track record, because you would actually we would pick the managers in which we invest the clients, in which the company would invest the clients' funds in.
You're the fund of funds. So I understand you're like analyzing the managers, but when like they give you that list of names to go research in Bloomberg, like you can get the thematics of like where they're investing, what industries, what their style is. But then were you able to like, before, I guess maybe later down the line when you're doing diligence, you'd get return data?
Sorry. That would obviously be the point that they're probably interested in actually having a meeting with them.
Got it. Okay.
But yeah, so that was pretty interesting.
Cool. So like you were doing that, you were there for almost 2 years. Do you mind mentioning pay at all? Like in terms of what, you're now coming out of top school with the master's.
So that was, the bracket was like 30 to 40K.
Pounds, right?
Yeah, GBP. Pounds, yeah.
And then was there any bonus associated with it?
So it was like, asset management, I think
10K or something, 5K.
Yeah, the 10 to 30%. The 30% is more for like, I guess, investment front office.
Got it. So would you say this was a program that was like more middle office, back office support, or like this rotational program? And how common are those kind of coming out of these types of master's programs?
I would say it is a little bit more, because at least in the UK, a big part of that business is geared towards that. So they obviously have an investment team and, both fixed income and equities, but that's not necessarily their brand strength. So I think that's partly.
Were you looking to kind of try to transition into that front office?
Yeah. So I obviously didn't mention it, but that's kind of what I wanted to do since the beginning, right? But it
makes sense. For anyone with ambition, you'd think you'd want to be making the decisions in the actual, if you love the markets, right? To be doing that. So, okay. So is that what prompted kind of the next move after the, year and 10, like when did you start looking? Were you networking this whole time? How was your kind of whole process of making that next jump for yourself?
Yeah. So I started probably a year in. So when I had a year to spare. And the other reason for that is that you leave the program, whatever happens after 2 years. So I didn't want to be in a situation where, even if I was going to stay, if I didn't want to end up in a role where, I didn't want to be. And I just really wanted to make sure that I sort of prepared, as much as possible.
So when did they tell you, like, if you're allowed to stay past the 2 years? Is that pretty common?
I think that you work towards it in the last 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
and that's usually in conjunction with them trying to find your role internally.
Got it.
Obviously, I was also looking outside, so I didn't tell them, but I started looking around a year before. A year in.
Would you recommend keeping that quiet for the people who are in a similar boat?
I would. I would, because, and another reason for that is just, I wasn't sure, like if a role had opened, in the last 6 months, in the team where I happened, and they quite liked me or whatever, then, I would have taken it. And I probably would have burned a bridge had I said, "Oh, I'm going to leave, guys," and then being like,
right.
So yeah.
Okay, so that's good advice. So you started looking like a year before, which I think is smart. Like, give yourself a long runway to potentially see as many opportunities, get better at interviewing again, get into that mindset, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so tell me how that all went. Was it like mostly just informal info chats? I know in London, the networking is a little bit different, and like the formal channels of recruiting are a little more strict in terms of having to follow those. Tell me a little bit about kind of that whole process for you and how it worked.
Yeah, so I guess one of the best, the primary way was just basically reaching out to recruiters. So I spoke to quite a few recruiters over that time. Some of them were good, some of them weren't so good. But one thing I kind of would do want to mention is that recruiters, in my experience, aren't always out in your best interest. And there's been, I luckily had, people who sort of knew what I wanted to do and were supportive, and I sort of took enough time in advance to be able to prepare. But a lot of the time, sometimes they try and sell stuff to you, like, this is a great role, and I placed someone here last year who's now moved into front office. This is like, it's a good stepping stone, and you're like, well, I don't think so. So I did that.
How do you kind of know the difference? Because a lot of younger kids may fall for that. How do you just don't take anything a recruiter says, take it with a large grain of salt? Is that just the message here? Because they're just trying to get the placement and move on, right?
Yeah, they do. And I think it's even more so if you're trying to, I guess, move front office or move up, because they see your profile. They know that they can place other people, that maybe are better fitted for the role. So there isn't much incentive for them to actually
pass you.
And, so I guess that system, I think I think recruiters actually, and I've met quite a few really, really helpful, useful ones and really nice ones. So, nothing against recruiters, but I think using resources and looking online, and even like WSO, to be honest, just talking about like, hey, I'd like to move into this area. What do you guys think? And I think being able to use sort of different sources of reference, and knowing that beforehand is really helpful.
Yeah, it gives you a little bit of a frame of different paths you could take, different kind of lateral moves you can make that potentially get you closer to your end goal. Right.
Correct.
So how did you figure that out? So you talked to some helpful recruiter that did give you maybe some good guidance, some trying to push you into roles that may not have been a good place for you. How did it all evolve? Eventually, how did you end up finding your next role? And then let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. So I sort of wanted to move into alternative assets. So I wanted to, particularly real assets, or real estate and infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Especially real estate, because that's kind of where I'd done a bit of work beforehand, and it sort of made sense. And so I sort of focused on that. So roles didn't always come, sometimes there's, I'd have to wait a few weeks, but I sort of made sure that I kind of understood the fundamentals as much as I could, tried to, be up to sort of, general market news, be able to sort of talk about the economics of that particular asset class, and also just sort of, really start to speak to as many people within that asset class and industry as possible, just to familiarize myself and maybe, get insights into how to prepare, and, perhaps what modeling or Excel skills could be useful and stuff like that.
And you were still kind of interviewing mostly with asset managers, is that correct?
Yeah.
So you were thinking of joining kind of an asset manager, but more like with a focus on real estate.
That's correct.
Okay. So tell me how you kind of went about that. I mean, obviously LinkedIn, maybe it was helpful, but how else did you, and then tell me how you kind of eventually got this offer.
Yeah. So I was sort of interviewing, I think 1 or 2 places at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I really like this one because it's a it's a really big asset manager. That from what I'd sort of done in research, they had a pretty decent team, reputable team. And so I went for an interview there, met 2 analysts, had an Excel test, and then after that, after the first interview, I was like, okay, I really, I like them a lot. I can kind of see myself here. And I really just sort of did everything I could in terms of research and just even talking to people in my old firm and my uncle, in terms, even also the soft skills, because I think that's something which you can sort of forget sometimes, or I forgot, I think.
Yeah, you're thinking modeling, Excel, and then you forget you have to make a connection with the interviewer.
Exactly. And I think my uncle helped me with that a bit, and I think that was actually really important and really helpful. At the end of the day, you're sitting down with a team, and they need to like you.
And so this role, would you still can you be more specific about what you're doing? And
sure,
would you consider it front office? Would you consider it still middle office? You're building towards that still, or tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I work as a fund manager assistant within sort of the global real estate securities desk, a large asset manager.
Mm-hmm.
So I was working in the investment team.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't call it purely front office, because the reason being is that at the end of the day, I'm not making any investment decisions as per se.
Mm-hmm.
And in asset management, I guess, so the fund managers, they're the ones that call the shots. And then equity analysts, obviously, they're the guys who will, do research on on companies, geographies, etc., underwrite, and then make recommendations. And I sort of sit in between both. But
is this a common role, the fund manager assistant role, or is it special to certain asset managers?
I think it's actually specific to certain asset managers. I don't think, because I've looked around and I've seen,
because I haven't heard it. So it's interesting. You're sitting kind of in between the equity analysts' recommendations and the fund managers to kind of, what's your role day to day? Kind of what are you doing?
Yeah. So for example, my responsibility. So I get in the morning, turn on Thomson Reuters, Bloomberg, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the first things I'll do and share to the portfolio managers and the team is obviously sort of the cash positions, because we trade the fund trades intraday,
mm-hmm.
and especially recently it's been very volatile. So I'll do that in the morning, send that out. We have a really sort of big proprietary global investment framework model, which is my responsibility to update daily, to check, because we update the pricing of all the companies within our universe, and that gets loaded into that. At the same time, there's a couple of, we from that we derive our risk scores and our value scores for the companies that we invest in, mm-hmm. and it's really the center of information. So I need to make sure that's sort of up and running and ready for the day.
Got it.
And then for the rest, my role is pretty ad hoc in nature, which is really interesting. So I can quite easily be helping the equity analyst on some research, whether that's sort of, broader thematic, or a subsector in real estate, whether it's German residential, or, France offices or whatever. And then, so I'll be helping them in that capacity. Or I could be very well, because I help the fund managers in all of their, also sort of the cash management. And what I mean by that is sort of, because we have a global fund, we obviously, so we run sort of currency forwards. Obviously cash management and sort of sweeping and stuff like that has to be done quite regularly, because, so that's the more operational side of the fund, I guess.
Yeah.
So there's that part too. And then obviously there's
you probably enjoy the research side a little bit more, I assume.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And then there's obviously, on the more client side, is I obviously help so we have a product team because, there's obviously the asset manager is big enough for that.
Yeah.
But there's lots of sort of much smaller meetings or things that, the fund managers might want me to prepare for, for presentations, for road shows, for clients, or and stuff like that. And I also work quite closely with the general research team who for which we're basically building a pretty impressive sort of asset database, which is specific to real estate, because you can actually map every single asset if you want.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think obviously research and investment, that's the direction.
That's cool. Yeah. So do you feel like this position will eventually potentially allow you to become a fund manager one day, or is that the goal?
Yeah.
Or what's the goal?
I think, yeah. So, I mean, I think it does. I mean, it does. It's a question of time, but also skill. Because I think there's the progression in asset management, maybe in general, is maybe not as structured and linear. So,
how do you speed up that time frame? Like, I wouldn't even know. Like, obviously, getting really being able to understand real estate itself, like, would really help, right? But are the funds structured in such a way where, like, you could be a fund manager of a real estate portfolio?
Yeah, it could be the case.
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah. So obviously, yeah. So the understanding the asset class, but also there is part of it is a little bit of timing. So, if you just need, for example, if one of the two co-fund managers leaves, the most senior equity analyst is probably going to be likely to be promoted to. So it's not as structured in that way. But to sort of answer your question, well, a parallel to your question is I'm actually looking to move into sort of direct real estate, so more REP type style.
Cool.
So that's the end goal, the holy grail.
How has that gone in terms of your recruiting so far? Like, do you feel like you're getting traction because of because now you have a little bit of a theme, real estate theme there, or are people not willing to look at you because oftentimes they're like, oh, he doesn't have the direct investment experience? I think it's interesting for a lot of people, because a lot of people get potentially stuck in an asset manager or a middle office position thinking, well, can I make the jump to the direct investment side? And maybe you can shed some light on that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely not easy.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that so in real estate, I think that really it helps me because I understand quite a lot. I understand the fundamentals, I understand the asset class. It helps me in that regards. But on the other hand, it is pretty difficult. But I have gained traction a little bit more recently, and it's only been more recently because it's coming up to 2 years now. Mm-hmm. And I think it's at this point of my career that I think is the right time to try and do it, because I'm guessing I think like for other industries, I think you kind of do want to do it, maybe let's say up into your first 5-6 years of.
You don't want to be 10 years in.
Exactly. I think that yeah.
Because then you're like, no, he's been doing this for like 6 years or whatever. He's been in this assistant role or whatever, fund manager assistant role. It can kind of pigeonhole you a little bit if you can't make that pivot out. Well, I would just say to you, even if it takes you 2 more years to do it, just keep talking to people.
Thanks.
Yeah, because I think, you can eventually get there if you talk to the right person at the right time. A lot of it is luck and a lot of it is timing. And, if you have the knowledge and you speak intelligently about the asset class, and maybe even show them that you've done some real estate modeling and, have those chops, I think you can potentially get an entry-level role, which may be even a pay cut. But it's where you want to be long-term, and then you can grow with the fund,
Exactly. That's kind of what I'm hoping and thinking. I mean, I think,
has pay gotten better now that you moved to the larger asset manager and you're in this kind of what I'll call hybrid role?
Yeah, it has.
40, 50 or?
Yeah, well, it's pretty much 50, 60.
50, 60. Yeah, that's great. 50, 60,000 pounds. Yep.
So it has changed. It has changed quite a bit.
Is that tough in London to live on that though? Because London's crazy expensive.
I mean, the thing is, London is expensive, but rent, you can sort of, I feel like 50 is like, once you get to 50, you're like, okay, you can sort of
okay.
kind of,
You
yeah.
can survive on the base. You don't have to have the bonus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But London is expensive, but I mean, you don't have to go crazy on rent. And rent isn't as bad as, I mean, I think it's not as bad as New York, I feel.
Really? I always thought it was a little bit worse, but maybe I'm wrong. I haven't lived in New York for, what is it? 10 years? Oh, 10 years. No, 12 years. Jeez. I turned 40 recently, 3 months ago. And so it's still like, I'm in shock that it went by so fast all this time. Cool, man. Well, this has been really interesting. Any kind of parting wisdom or advice you'd want to give people kind of in a similar background, maybe high school dropouts, online learners, anybody
Sure.
anything else
Sure.
you want to tell them?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think the first thing is that, if you really, I'm not saying anyone can do anything, but I think that if you do put your heart to things, and if you generally in an informed way, where you sort of gone out and reached out to people and know what it's about, you can change things, and that it's not because you don't necessarily have the more traditional background that things won't work out, and then even beyond that, maybe there's things that you're not aware of on the side, and so I think from my perspective, none of this was sort of planned. It's just every next step is like, what's the best option? So that'd be my biggest piece of advice.
It's awesome. I love it. And I think it's really important advice. I think hopefully we're playing a small part in people understanding all these different paths people can take, because I feel like one of the biggest things, and I think it plays to your story as well, is just, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what's out there until you talk to somebody who's like, you're like, hedge fund, what? Like, what is that about? And then all of a sudden it opens up this whole other thing. And, even when I was in banking, and back in, this is a long time ago, it's going to date me, 2002, I had no idea what private equity was. I guess it was less prevalent back then, and there was no Wall Street Oasis. So I had a fellow analyst sit me down and be like, this is private equity. You want to get there. This is how you study for it. Here, study this. And so it's funny how it just opens up your eyes. And, I remember thinking, okay, what am I going to do after banking? And like, I think when you're younger, you typically sometimes don't look more than a couple of years ahead, or even 6 months ahead. Nowadays, that can be a real detriment. I really do think it can, because like, things are super early, and I think it's actually making things harder for kids who are not in the know early. So the high school student who knows what investment banking is, private, is at a huge advantage, because recruiting's freshman or sophomore year now. It's crazy. And so, I mean, you look at your story, and you didn't finish high school. You had some family issues, and you traveled. I think the other thing was your mom was a really strong influence on you. I think she did a great job. Just kind of forcing you out of your bubble.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I agree 100%.
Probably helped you grow a lot. So, cool, man. Well, thanks so much for sharing your story. I'm sure people enjoyed it, and yeah, let's stay in touch.
Sorry, I missed that.
I was saying, thanks for sharing your story, and let's stay in touch.
Likewise. Thank you very much, Patrick. Thank you for having me. It was great.
And thanks to you, my listeners at Wall Street Oasis. If you have any suggestions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to send them my way, patrick@wallstreetoasis.com. Until next time.